You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Hello, everyone. I hope you had a good weekend. I wanted to talk today about a few things. One, I wanted to talk about this idea that everybody lies except Amanda Knox, and the people who think she's guilty are so unfair to her, and everyone who accused her or thinks she's guilty is just too proud to admit that we're all wrong. And in fact, there was no evidence at all against her, and that this was all a vibe, right? So I found an interesting thing. I've been reading A Death in Italy by John Follian, who attended the trial, and really enjoying it. And he talks about, he quotes Amanda in her prison diary. And I just wanted to read it really quickly. Okay, so she writes, "To all those who believed I was a criminal mastermind and a murderer, I forgive you." Oh, thank you, Amanda. That's me. Not Amanda, by the way. "I forgive you," she writes. "How could you have known? You believed the recycled rumors of newspapers. Heck, if I were in your shoes, I would do the same thing." So I think that's an interesting admission from Amanda. So is she saying that those who read about the evidence against her in this case, you come to a conclusion of guilt, that she would do the same thing? Or is she saying something else? Let me know in the comments what you think. But before I get to the other stuff I have for you, let's take a break and I'll meet you on the other side. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. So I've gone over in previous episodes why the prosecution in this case and myself as well agrees that it would be awfully difficult to scale the wall and get into the house the way the defense says Rudy Gude did. Okay, so now we're looking at the house, and Philomena's room is on the left, the one closest to us. And one of the ways they showed how easy it was to just scale the walls and get in. So you have to remember that Philomena says her shutters were closed. So I assume the defense is saying this had to be done in two parts. It's a gigantic rock, right? And there was no impressions on the ground. It had been muddy and raining the night before. There's no mud on the side of the wall. If he had been able to throw this giant rock through the window, there would obviously be glass on the sill. So to push himself up, he would have to push up on the glass and cut himself. But as we know, there is no DNA of Rudy Gude in Philomena's room, which is the room of the stage break-in. And that is one of the things that the Supreme Court, when that let Amanda go, decided that the break-in room was staged, that Amanda Knox was there at the scene of the crime, that she washed Meredith Kircher's blood off of her hands, and that this was a crime of multiple attackers. So to show us how easy it is, they got a professional climber, and I want to just watch this with you together, and you can see how deceptive it is. For one thing, it's a professional climber, and two, the house has been changed. There's no upper bars. They put those in after Meredith Kircher's murder. So let's just take a look at the defense footage. Okay, so here we are. Okay.
Another issue with this window. It's 3.5 meters above the ground. Even if it was broken from the outside, could a single person climb up to it to enter the flat?
And also they leave out another part of the prosecution's theory in this, which is that there was a nail sticking out from the wall. And had someone scaled like Spider-Man up the side of this incredibly difficult to climb house, they would have bent the nail. But there's no mention of the nail now. That piece of the argument is totally out. The mud argument is totally out. The blood argument that you would hurt your hands or hurt any part of your body really going through a broken window, that's all out. And now it's all about the climbing, and they've got a professional climber in to show us how it's done.
To find out, our lawyers have recruited Peruvian climbing enthusiast Ricardo Pinella.
Okay, Ricardo. If you could do us a favor and test this out.
This is the actual window smashed the night Kircher was killed.
So they don't also tell you what his height is compared to Rudy Gude's height. Nothing like that. He's just a climbing enthusiast, and he's going to show us how easily it's done.
Bars have been fitted since, possibly to prevent a break-in.
Well, you make that seem so easy.
Yes, it's really easy.
You are an experienced rock climber.
Yes,
Do you feel, based on this experience, that you need to be an experienced rock climber to be able to accomplish this feat, or is it sufficient to be athletic and tall and well-built and so on?
It's not only for me, for athletic person, it's not a problem to climb that.
It's
Okay, so you got the point. No problem climbing it. And you can see how much he used the bars to pull himself up on the top window. Otherwise, you're pushing up on that ledge. Plus, the shutters were closed, but they're not going to mention any of that. And that is how a good innocence fraud campaign is done, which is to just eliminate a lot of the arguments and just leave one and then debunk it and say, look, I've debunked the whole thing, right? So I just wanted to, there was, what I found out reading this book was so interesting, is that another experiment was done by the defense team in August of 2008. Yeah, that's right. So August 27th, 2008. And I'll just show you a passage from the book. It was a little hard to take a picture, just so you know I'm not making it up. Okay. So on the eve of the hearings, which would decide whether Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy would stand trial, Raffaele's lawyers played a risky card. They wanted to prove that an intruder, They didn't say who outright, but it was clear they meant Rudy could have broken into the cottage, though through Philomena's window, and then murdered Meredith. To do so, the lawyers asked for permission to enter the garden of the cottage, which was granted. Raffaele's team chose for the experiment Delfo Beretti, a bearded, long-haired lawyer who had the significant advantage of being more than 6 feet tall. Watched by Mannyy and the detectives of the homicide squad, Beretti took just a few seconds to climb up the wall and get a hold on Philomena's windowsill. But he could not pull himself up and hung there, stranded. And to avoid any further embarrassment, a colleague called out hastily, quote, "That's enough, that's fine," unquote. Beretti let himself fall back to the ground. For Mannyy, that's the prosecutor, the experiment had backfired on Raffaele's lawyers. So that's a little hidden part of the defense's history, and one that I didn't know about, which was another experiment done on whether you could climb those walls, whether it actually could be done by a regular non-climbing expert. And I think I'm just going to take one more quick break, and I'll meet you on the other side. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Right. So some people said they couldn't see it. So is that right? So we'll do it again. All right. Let me show it to you one more time, just very quickly. Okay. Just so you guys can see the demonstration one more time. We'll watch it one more time together. Here we go.
If it was broken from the outside, could a single person climb up to it to enter the flat? To find out, our lawyers have recruited Peruvian climbing enthusiast Ricardo Pinella.
Okay, Ricardo. If you could do us a favor and test this out.
This is the actual window smashed the night Kircher was killed. Bars have been fitted since, possibly to prevent a break-in.
Wow, you make that seem so easy.
Yes, it's really easy.
You are an experienced rock climber.
Yes,
Do you feel, based on this experience, that you need to be an experienced rock climber to be able to accomplish this feat, or is it sufficient to be athletic and tall and well built and so on?
It's not only for me, for athletic person, it's not a problem to climb that.
It's been said that the shutters were closed at the time, the outside, the green shutters.
It's not a problem to open. And if you want, you can break the glass and clean the pieces of the glass that remain in the windows, and then you can put up yourself and go on the windows without the bars. It's not difficult and enter in the house.
Mm-hmm. So irrespective bars, no bars, you can
It's
get
not
in.
a problem.
I see.
Okay.
And there's another issue with this window.
Okay. That's it. So that they're mentioning the closed shutters, and they're saying, "Oh, you just like brush away the glass. No probs, guys. No problem." But it was actually a problem for Raf's own defense team. So it's not a problem for this expert climber. You just go up and then because when you're about to burglar a place, you want to risk going up twice, right? And anyone seeing you. And you just brush away the glass, no problem. I mean, and when you're carrying 2 knives, like the 2 knives were used, no probs. But one of the other things that clued in Mannyy was that the glass was on top of the objects that were rifled through, meaning someone had rifled through them, then broken the window. And Amanda Knox admits that she has a history of staging break-ins. She staged a break-in before she went to Perugia. So isn't that interesting? But his defense team, I assume that this happened. They made this video after they got that it was such a failure with their own defense team. They're like, we'll get an expert climber next time, right? So next up, I just wanted to finish up this Amanda Knox interview done by the University of Washington students. I thought it was really interesting. And it starts out with Amanda talking where we left off. Just to remind everyone, we left off with Amanda Knox talking about her mother taking Valium and how upset that she was that her mother took Valium because she felt that it was I don't even know if I can put any logic to this, but she went through her experience, which was so much worse than her mother's, without taking any drugs. And how could her mother rely on Valium? It was so awful. Refer back to my last live stream about Amanda Knox if you want to see part 2 of this interview. This is part 3 of this interview. Let's take a look together.
I can't judge somebody who puts themselves into a coma so they don't have to live it. I just don't think it's the right way. I don't think you actually become a better person by not living for a while, which is what they're choosing to do. It's just better not to be alive for a while. And I really feel sorry for people like that. But it seemed like when my mom said it,
people like that, that's her mother. She feels sorry for her mother. So she's saying if you take Valium to go through a extremely traumatizing, stressful ordeal, that you're not living, that you're a zombie. Which is interesting because Amanda Knox on Joe Rogan let it be known that she's done a host of drugs. So I don't know. I don't know if it's big pharma she's objects to, and that she considers maybe something like mushrooms and marijuana more natural. I have no idea where she's going with this. It just seems so odd.
It was like I was stupid for even struggling so much. And I was angry to put myself gratuitously through more suffering when I could have just taken Valium. Have
you spoken to her about it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm really open with my mom. And her main thing is that.
So is this a bit like women who give birth naturally to children, who judge other women who get an epidural? Is this kind of what this is? I don't know. You tell me.
Well, first of all, they were very different circumstances, which I always have to take into consideration. So this is my mom, and her daughter is in a situation where she can do nothing to help her. That is insane. I understand that. And
why did she even show up if she could do nothing to help you, Amanda? She seemed to help you a lot, and your father too, hiring the best PR firm in Seattle. Your best friend moved over. Peyton, anyone remember her from the early Amanda Knox live streams, or anyone remember her from isn't that her name? Am I wrong? Peyton? That's what I want to say. She moved to Italy. If they all couldn't help you in any way, I mean, does she mean that her mom couldn't go on trial? Her mom gave evidence in this case because Amanda called her multiple times right as Meredith's body was being discovered. But she brought you clothes, she brought you food, she offered you emotional support. I would say that's being helpful, no?
And like, I understand that would make her go insane. And so she needed help. Like, she was having heart pressure issues and needed help. And, you know, she could go to the doctor that she trusted and get that recommendation. Whereas I was in prison with doctors who yanked people's teeth out like it was candy. Like, I did not trust them. I did not trust what they would give me. I did not trust what the other prisoners would do to me if I were on it. And the other thing was that...
Wait. Didn't she just say in the beginning of this interview that she was protected from almost all of the prisoners and that she felt like a zoo animal? But now she's saying that she couldn't even be on drugs because she was so vulnerable to the other prisoners. So which is it, Amanda? Were you kept away from the other prisoners and treated like a zoo animal in isolation with a few acceptable prisoners around you as a roommate? Or was it so, were you thrown in the thick of things where you couldn't even take drugs that you felt might be necessary at times because you were afraid of what the other prisoners would do to you? This is so much like a Damien Echols interview. You remember that Damien Echols interview where he talks about being at a New York comedy club and he was so at peace and he realized that he didn't worry about being shanked for the first time in how many years, 18 years or how many years? And then you think back and you're like, no, Damien Echols, you were on death row. You were who were you thinking is going to shank you on death row? You were in isolation there. And that was your other complaint, is that you were going crazy in isolation. So they can't have it both ways, but they do try.
I kept thinking, like, I am not... Hunger Games moment. I am not going to let this change me. I've never taken medication before for something that I've gone through, and God damn it, I played on a broken foot for a month before I went and got the doctor looked at it. Like, it was, no, I'm not that person. That's not who I am. I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to suck it up, and so anyway.
So she's saying that she's really, I wonder if this is close to the time that prison warden had her story put in the papers, where she said Amanda Knox never needed any drugs to sleep. She never cried. She was really very easily adjusted to prison, friends with the priest there, and really seemed like no other prisoner she'd seen, like just really adapted very well. I wonder if this is a reaction to that, to saying, no, it wasn't because I might be like, say, a psychopath that I dealt so well with the prison. It's really that I have such good character and I'm so tough. And I understand that need to brag about toughing through really difficult experiences, but it's just interesting that she's bringing it up here in relation to just, you know, putting down her mother, saying her mother didn't help her at all or couldn't help her at all and took Valium and was so weak and I was so strong.
Got sidetracked there. Don't even worry about being sidetracked. Your question was on the first months in prison. I was in segregation, like I said. So I was very much like, everyone knew who I was and I knew who no one was. Very fishbowl I didn't know how the prison worked. No one told me how anything worked. I did eventually get assigned to a room where I had a cellmate, though. And God, you think high school's bad. You think that's bad. Trying to navigate the social structure of prison is a struggle. God, like I don't even know where to begin to tell you how hard it is. Because there's so many contradictory elements. Like there's this sense of solidarity because we're all in this together and we're all suffering through this shit together. And then there's the, I do not trust any of you ever. I think that all of you are lying and are only out for your best interest, and everyone thinks that about everyone. So
Funny, Amanda. Yet they, according to the prison guard, they shared their food with you, and you didn't share any of your food, and you got a lot of it. That's one of the reasons they didn't like you, Amanda. And I can understand it. I wouldn't want to do it. I'm not volunteering to be put in an Italian prison anytime soon. I get it. But yeah, they called you the actress. And you get one more, and here's this theme again. Everyone lies and is untrustworthy except Amanda Knox. No matter how many times she's been caught in a lie, she's still the only one who tells the truth, and everyone else is lying. All the time.
everyone's in this all together, and yet everyone is at each other's throats. Everyone against everyone, and we're all in one for all. And it's this contradictory thing that I really struggled to come to terms with, because when people started out being really interested in me, I didn't understand that a large part of it had to do with the fact that I was on TV. And
What? A large part of it was that she was on TV? Once again, it's not because she was first accused, then convicted of the murder of Meredith Kircher in concert with 2 other people. Not that. It's that she was on TV like a celebrity. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Unreal. Diego Rivera, thank you so much for the 4-pound super sticker. I really appreciate it. Unreal. This is unreal. Thankfully, this is the last of this interview.
furthermore, I really wanted some sense of familiarity. Like, I really struggled to find friends. And I made some friends. Most people, I mean, like I said, most people try to skate by through prison living as little as possible just so the time goes quickly. So if you can take medication to be out of it the entire time, that's a common strategy, a very common strategy. Also soap operas, very common strategy.
But Amanda's not going to do any of those things, right, guys? Because Amanda's special. She's much tougher than any of these other people. She's going to tough it out. She doesn't need medication or Valium or anything. She just needs herself because she's so tough, right?
What were some of the things that you did
To cope? So what really drove me crazy about it, especially when I was waiting longer than I thought I was going to have to wait. And then I got the document that said, oh yeah, by the way, like the police have a year before they have to charge you. And I was just like, what? I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. Can you please explain to me like what you just said to me again? Yeah, you know, the police have a year before they have to charge you. So I get to live a year of my life while you're deciding whether or not to charge me. I have to lose that year of my life because you're thinking about charging me.
Don't worry, Amanda, you won't lose anything because you falsely accused Patrick Lumumba of murdering Meredith Kircher. So really you did the correct amount of time for your slander conviction. So don't worry, you won't do any time for your wrongful conviction. And that may be one of the reasons that you never asked for money for your wrongful, for those years you were wrongfully in prison, quote unquote, right? Raf asked and they rejected it because it's such a thin case, right? It's such a razor thin case. It's so easily seen that that he had nothing to do with it, that they gave him zero money. They were like, no thanks. See you later, Raf. Not interested in paying you for what we consider a totally rightful conviction.
Okay. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like being absolutely stunned, but you don't have any choice in the matter. You just are told this and go back to your cell now. So it was incredibly debilitating, like just psychologically, like everything that I thought the way the world worked, nothing. Like you are nothing. So coping. I got really obsessed with making each day count, which sounds like really cliche. But I would get really angry with myself if I felt like I had not made the day worth living, because then I would feel like I had just lost a day of my life. And I hated the idea of them taking my life away. And so well, at the very beginning, I spent a lot of my time reassuring my family members. I
think the sound just went out. That's the meaning, Amanda, of the blood evidence. I mean, it's so triggering when she says that she wasn't, her life was lost. No, you have your life, Amanda. Meredith's is no more. And that was what the Supreme Court decided, that you were there at the scene and you washed Meredith Kircher's blood off your hands. Why? And that's the meaning of the mixed blood evidence, the mixed DNA that lights up under luminol in Philomena's room and in the bathroom. That means you were both bleeding at the same time. Why, Amanda? Why? It's just so triggering to me when she says that she lost her life. Give me a break.
I think so. I didn't know this at the time, but they were confiscating all of my letters and photocopying them before they sent them out. And I believe it was something.
Really? They never told you that your letters would be monitored? Seriously? Seriously, Amanda? And she's the one who said that, like, oh, I've seen CSI, I've seen crime shows. She's not aware that they that they record your phone calls and they track your letters in prison, especially such a high profile case. She's bewildered by that. Come on.
Like 800 letters in 6 months that I wrote. Something like that. Something like ridiculous like that, because I spent so much time writing letters, talking about what I was seeing in the prison, and just constantly doing this like reassuring, like, let it be, man, like it's all gonna be good, man. It's like trying to apply positivity to the situation, because this situation was so completely out of control and foreign to me. Like it was just like this constant feeling dumbstruck about everything. And so a lot of time writing to my family members, reassuring them that I was okay, because you don't know anything about prison. Like my family doesn't know what it's like to be in prison. I didn't know what it was like to be in prison. I was in prison. I still didn't know what the hell was going on and what it was like to be in prison. I was still there, like getting over the shock of even just being there. And so I would tell them about funny things that I was seeing, like how Italian MTV is similar or different to American MTV. Or how hilarious Homer Simpson sounds in Italian, like that kind of stuff. Like, but always just this constant mantra of like, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be figured out. Who knows? Like, I could be free tomorrow, type of thing. And that was always reassuring. I learned Italian.
I mean, if this were me, you could not stop me from talking about my case. I would be going over every detail that they got wrong, every single little thing that they got wrong. Why is she talking about Homer Simpson and MTV? I get what she's saying. I understand that. I just don't understand why are we on all these topics. I would be just going over and over again. They got it wrong this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, and this way. And let me tell you more in more detail. Exactly how I was, quote, wrongfully convicted, unquote, right?
I got a grammar note, like I got a grammar book, and then I proceeded to spend hours writing a kind of sentence in different grammatical forms. So I go to the store, I went to the store, I thought about going to the store, maybe I went to the store, maybe not. I had gone to the store, but then I went to the zoo, like that kind of stuff. And just meticulously going through that, because I was very much at a disadvantage by not understanding the language. Nobody in prison spoke English. There was one guard who spoke fairly good English, but I didn't have her at my disposal in order to speak with.
That's another whole topic that could be, I mean, the more I get into this, the more topics to talk about than I have time for, really. But another topic that is interesting is Amanda's real mastery of languages. She spoke pretty good Italian at the time of Meredith Kercher's murder. She already spoke German very well. And yet in her trial, one of the impressions I got reading the transcripts is she was using the translator to give her time and also to kind of slyly manipulate what she said or had said and use the language barrier to her advantage. So here she is complaining that she couldn't communicate with the other. Was she isolated or she couldn't communicate? Which is it? But I believe that the priest that she was friends with spoke really good English. I thought, no? Or did she speak Italian with him? Curious to know. But you can see her Italian writing is pretty decent. And I don't think, I mean, she's acting like she didn't speak any Italian at all. And she was proficient in it at the time of Meredith's murder. And I would think that by the time she left the Italian prison, she was probably fluent in it.
With people. And that was a very big disadvantage. Especially when part of the problem and what landed me in my mind in prison in the first place was because I was not making myself understood. I was at that point still thinking that it was largely my fault for being there because of the interrogation. And it was only after I was convicted that I realized that no matter what, the police were planning on arresting me in that interrogation anyway, no matter what.
So it didn't matter that she falsely accused Patrick Lumumba. The police just had a vibe and they were going to arrest her anyway. They hadn't up until that moment that she placed herself at the scene of the murder and falsely accused her boss of murder. But she realized afterwards it wasn't her fault, guys. Come on, it wasn't her fault. Guys are so hard on her. It wasn't her fault. They were going to arrest her anyway.
What came out of it. So, yeah, kept thinking that I would be let out, and kept having that slammed in my face. Just no. Which is just stunning. Like it's hard to explain it. To just have everything fall apart.
It's stunning that I had to be held accountable for my lies when I never had to be held accountable before for my lying, falsely accusing Patrick, and then changing my story a billion times, right? Lying my head off about where I was, what I did. Go back to her story about the sink. And, it's very interesting. She's very certain about what she did. She stayed with Raph the whole night, very certain about what she did up until the minute that Raph pulls his alibi from her. And then her memory gets very hazy. She's unsure. She can't remember anything. And she just needs help to remember. She's just struck with a kind of amnesia.
And to have nothing. It didn't make sense. And then being constantly reassured that it's going to be okay by everyone. It's going to be okay. Yeah, don't just wait.
Wouldn't you find that reassuring if you were falsely accused? Wouldn't you find that reassuring? Yeah, they can see that I didn't do this. I'm sure that the evidence I'm sure my alibi will come right through. I'll iron this out. I'm sure there's tons of strong evidence of my innocence to present at trial, but she doesn't find any of that comforting. Why? Because there's a lot of evidence against her. A lot more than a lot of the other cases I talk about, for sure.
Which then leads to being charged. But then, my lawyers were like, okay, no, but it's good that you're charged because now we can look at what evidence they have and show them that they're wrong. And so I was like, okay, I guess it's a good thing that I'm charged then, okay. And one of the things that was pretty incredible just about this particular case is that what my defense had at their disposal was not like we had to constantly fight to have access to the evidence. And that was devastating to our defense, not having access to the evidence. So, and when I say that, like when they say that there's Meredith's DNA on the knife, they tell us that. And they're like, this is the evidence, Meredith's DNA on the knife. And when I say to my lawyers that's impossible, they say, okay, well, you say that, but can you show us like your actual data so we can see if you're making the right decision or not? Because we have our own medical independent experts, and if we have access to that data, then we can also check it and see if there was an error made. No, impossible. No error. Impossible. No, you can't see that. You don't need to see that. We're professionals. We know what we're doing. And we had to fight for years to have access to data, simply so we could actually look at the evidence. And indeed, that's ultimately what ended up happening.
What ended up happening was that it was low copy DNA. So there was very little, because the reason that knife stood out was because it was way cleaner than any other knife in the drawer. So they only had, it was a little bit of Meredith's DNA in the groove of the blade of the knife. And they had one shot to test it, and there wasn't enough DNA to retest it. But that is good enough in Italian law. So when they retested it, there was Amanda's DNA again on the knife, but not Meredith's, because there was only a little bit of DNA of Meredith's there to test. So Amanda and her supporters will say it's rye bread, just like they say the luminol, the DNA, the mixed DNA of Meredith and Amanda, that it came up like that because Amanda lived there and she had root vegetables on her feet. Or horseradish, take your pick, either one. But that's what set off the luminol, not blood. She wasn't bleeding, she just had root vegetables, and they'll say this rye bread on the knife that set this off. And as for these tests, they're all over the internet for anyone who wants to look at the copy of the DNA and how it was done. Dr. Stefani's reports are on the internet. If you want to read them, who processed it, I believe she's the one who processed the knife. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, there's reports on all this evidence. If people want to read it, it's out there. It's not hidden. So it's kind of odd that they'd hide it from her defense team and not the rest of the world, no?
I was convicted. Like, why was I convicted? Because the first court took for granted that the police were right. And that's it. So when the police say that there's Meredith's DNA on the knife, there has to be Meredith's DNA on the knife. And when the police...
They didn't take it for granted. Your defense team just didn't make a compelling argument. They couldn't debunk all the evidence against you, and it's quite plentiful, much more so than Solecito.
Say that this homeless man has a reliable witness testimony. He has a reliable witness testimony. And when the police say that they did not do anything that could have contaminated the bra clasp that was associated with Raphael, that means that that's right. And when the police say that I must have cleaned up
that bra clasp was found under Meredith Kircher's body. So, yeah, they've always said that bra clasp was contaminated. Fine. You want to throw it out? You still have Raph's footprint in Meredith's blood on the bath mat. That's the problem with this case. If you want to throw out one piece of testimony, like she's talking about the heroin addict that saw her and Raph on the basketball court outside her house that night, Fine, throw it out. But there's still so much other evidence and your own conflicting stories and lies. That's what convicted you, Amanda. Your own mouth. And I think that's what drives her crazy, too.
Crime scene, because that's the only explanation for how I could have participated in the murder and then left no trace of myself at the crime scene, is if I had gone and cleaned.
We got that PR talking point again. No trace of her at the crime scene. So if you want to reduce the crime scene to just Meredith's room, you have her size shoe print on the pillowcase. You have her lamp, which was her only light source, pointed underneath Meredith's bed, where there's also smudges of blood, like someone was looking to retrieve something from under the bed, maybe. Maybe it was used for that, possibly. But what was your lamp doing in Meredith's room, Amanda? You've got a lot of time to think about it and make up a story, and I've never heard anyone ask her that. Not once.
Cleaned up all traces of me, but left all of the blood and all of the DNA evidence against the actual perpetrator. And that, we're just going to take it for granted that that's the case. And so it was just this constantly taking for granted that the police were right about things when they were blatantly wrong. Like just blatantly wrong. Evidence of them having dirty gloves when they were collecting.
They had dirty gloves. How dare they? It's this whole, they're the real perpetrators. They're the real criminals. Lock them up kind of cry from Amanda Knox. And there was no trace of me in the room. Right?
Evidence of them like doing the examination of the DNA on the knife and like having results that said that they were unreliable and then saying, no, they're reliable. Like the machine says it's not reliable evidence. And then they just are like, it's reliable. Like the blatant.
Listen to how vague she is. What are you talking about? What piece of evidence? Yeah, there was controls done. Are you talking about that? I have no idea what she's talking about. Yeah, your defense team, of course, is going to say all the DNA evidence is unreliable, right? Except for Rudy Gude. That's what your supporters say too. The Italian justice system was right on with Rudy Gude, but way off with you and Raph. Sounds plausible, right?
Misconduct in this case is startling. And I think that's one of the main reasons why it's such this controversial topic is because people don't really want to believe or can't really believe that it's so startlingly blatant. Like this meticulous grooming of the evidence so that it would fit a scenario. And it all happened because they decided to arrest me before my mom could come to Perugia. Like they were going to arrest me that night because they knew my mom was coming the following day.
Just to give you a reminder, they arrested her because she falsely accused Patrick Lumumba of doing this crime, said she was frightened of him, and put herself at the scene of the crime. That's why she got arrested. But now it's because they were dying to arrest her before her mom got there. And I don't even know what the logic is to that, but maybe she'll enlighten us.
And when they finally did actually have evidence, and it all pointed to another person, well, by then they had told the world that they had solved the crime. And
they said, no, just keep framing the American and her Italian boyfriend, because it was anti-Americanism and I guess anti self-hating Italian feelings. I don't know. I don't even know how Raph fits in with that. an anti-Madonna whore complex. I mean, this are all the things that they blame this conviction on. It's not the strength of the evidence. Whatever you think, it's not the strength of the evidence.
By God, they were going to say that they had solved the crime. And that is what happened. Just this constant, like, covering up of mistakes, and this so incredibly blatant, like, disregard of defensive rights, like this presumption of guilt, this suspect-oriented investigation, this unwillingness to admit that they were wrong, that continues to this day. Yeah.
Italian prosecutors, all they care about is being right. They don't care about locking up an innocent person for 26, 27 years. Doesn't matter. Just as long as they're right. That's how strong their pride is. Right?
Yeah, it's really curious. I wish people looked more into the investigators. Like, what could have...
Come on, guys, stop researching the evidence against me. Start researching against the people who convicted me. They're the real criminals. Come on, guys.
motivated them? What's their history? What's their experience? People have looked into the prosecutor, like the star prosecutor, a little bit, and found out that he was, you know, had issues with abuse of office and had issues with really relying on theories that involved...
Had issues. He was investigated and cleared. Something I think you would support, Amanda, no?
Satanic rituals, and was just...
Satanic panic got into this case, guys. Even though it was never argued in court, she's going to go the satanic panic route.
This, like, superstitious guy who had these very pinpointed ideas, and so people have looked into that, but people haven't looked into, like, the investigators who were also a part of it. They just, like, there's this general sense of the authorities are untouchable. Like, we don't actually acknowledge them as people, and that they are capable of making mistakes. And that...
Right, because no judge has ever gone to prison. Right, Amanda. Okay, they're beyond untouchable.
That's a mistake. It's a mistake to assume that. Of course, it all derives from the fact that for society to function, we have to have faith in certain parties. Mm-hmm. And when we think of the criminal justice system, most of us put ourselves in the position of the victim of a crime, right? We want a criminal justice system that responds to that need to make it so that people don't want to commit crime, and then when they do, they are punished. But people don't often think of themselves being the victim of the criminal justice system. And
that's why you're being interviewed. That's why the wrongful conviction movement is a multi-billion-dollar movement with everybody getting in on it. That's why almost every single channel has a wrongful conviction story on it. And that's why they're interviewing you, Amanda, and not Meredith Kircher's family or friends. Right? I wish it were like that. I wish people would identify with the victim, but that doesn't seem to be happening. America, at least, cannot get enough of these wrongful conviction stories. And the money, it's just a money machine from the media that's created, from the podcasts and the documentaries on that side, to the lawsuits, to the civil lawsuits, these multi-million-dollar payouts that taxpayers are paying for totally rightful convictions. It's a money machine. I wish it were like this, Amanda. I wish people were identifying with the victim and calling for murderers to be locked up and stay locked up, but that's not the case. This movement has done so much damage, from the Soros-backed DAs, and that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a real thing. I mean, it's like saying we're gonna always win because everybody's gonna be playing for the same side. So we're gonna have two different uniforms and different titles, but everybody's gonna basically be putting the ball in the basket on to the right. Right? That's what it's like, having these woke DAs in court that only care about the criminal and not the victim at all. I mean, it's so sinister. I mean, none of us would say, oh, Amanda Knox, let's get her a defense attorney that's really a prosecutor and that's going to be doing the state's business doing, right? I mean, so sinister. But we're almost at the end here, and this is the final chapter of this interview.
And of the crimes of people who represent that. And that is what is also an issue here. This is an issue for why people would go along with the conspiracy theory sort of thing, because how else could this have happened if there isn't some reason for it? Like, how else could this have happened if there isn't some conspiracy behind it, or if there isn't some rationale that we aren't being given the exact information about, and she must know something? Or
that's exactly what you're saying, Amanda. Talk about projection. That's exactly what you're saying. You're saying it was a conspiracy. That this conviction was done with a prosecutor who had a vibe, who knew he was wrong, couldn't admit he was wrong, and was willfully trying to convict and succeeding a innocent person because he was too proud to admit he was wrong. So that's exactly what you're saying, Amanda, that it was a conspiracy and that the evidence was sort of faked and we could never verify it. I mean, you've been putting out a conspiracy theory through the whole thing. What are we talking about here? It's wild, the projection.
How could she ever accuse an innocent person if she's innocent? And it's like, if you really want the answer to those questions, the answers are out there. Like, people have studied this. I am not the first person to have falsely confessed to something because I was psychologically tortured by people.
First of all, there's no evidence you were psychologically tortured. Secondly, you didn't falsely confess. You falsely accused your boss, Patrick Lumumba, of doing this crime, which is totally different. And you don't have any of the risk factors for a false confession. Low IQ, hours and hours of questioning. You falsely accused Patrick Lumumba after an hour of interrogation. Not 51 hours, not 50 hours. 1 hour, Amanda. 1 hour.
People. And then it's like, great, now I get to tell people, like, try to explain to people what it's like to be psychologically tortured. Good luck, Amanda. Like, good luck trying to explain that to people.
Especially when you weren't psychologically tortured. It makes it especially hard to explain it to people.
Especially when you're being labeled a murderer. Like, no one's ever going to believe me. Like,
okay, that is what I have for today. So have a great day, everybody. And I'll see you back here next time.